have the infrastructure and the operation to address customer issues as they have them reactively, which is, traditionally how support interactions work.
Yeah.
But ideally, over time, the data and insight you're getting from those customer interactions, you're learning about how customers encounter problems, when, where, how, all the context around it, and you put mechanisms in place to address those issues before they even encounter them, or you address them so quickly that there's no extra effort done on the customer.
Sara Feldman is the Director of Member Engagement at the Consortium for Service Innovation. It's a nonprofit alliance of service and support organizations, and they focus on innovation around customer engagement, productivity, and success. She's an experienced content and documentation specialist, and she's played roles in customer success enablement and technical content strategy for several organizations. Sara joined me on the podcast, and we had a good talk about the Consortium and how it helps organizations get better at customer success and customer experience as a result. And we talked about some of the concepts or the models that the organization has built around intelligent swarming and predictive customer engagement. They're actually very interesting strategies. And then we talked about Sara's own views on customer support and the role of customer success content. And there are a lot of really good insights from her in this podcast, so I'd encourage you to listen through the whole thing. Enjoy. So, Sara, thanks so much for joining us on the Content Matters podcast. It's great to have you with us today.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited about this conversation because you're doing some really interesting stuff, and I'm happy for myself to learn more about it, but also our listeners. So let's talk about the Consortium for Service Innovation. What exactly is it, and how did it get started?
Great question. The Consortium for Service Innovation has actually been around since 1992, a little bit before I was even in the workforce. And we'll be celebrating our 30th, no, what did I say that right? Yeah, 30th anniversary next year.
Wow. That's
cool.
Which
is pretty exciting. Yeah, absolutely. So I wasn't around as it got started, but from what I understand, folks from a few different companies realized that they had some similar problems they were trying to solve, and realized that they could help each other by sort of forming a group of collaborators, which has led over time to what we are today. We are a not-for-profit sort of grouping of member companies that come together to innovate around how to do business. Now, we primarily serve folks in the support and service industry, but we have branched out to product and customer success, customer experience as well.
Lots of commonalities, I assume, across all of those things when it comes to the work that you guys are doing.
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, the goal is to improve the customer experience. My career has been founded in the support industry, so anyone else out there who's done the same, we know how much the support experience is pivotal to the customer experience. But these days, the way support and product experiences are so intertwined, it's really all, it's all really happening together.
Yeah, exactly. So you've only been with the group for, I think it was not quite 6 months. You're the Director of Member Engagement. What do you do?
Yes, exactly. I've been on staff just since this past July, but I've been fortunate to have been participating with the group as a member on the member side of things for many years. So I certainly bring the member experience with me into my role on staff. But my job really, still evolving in some ways, but I've been brought on to make sure or help our members get what they need out of engaging with our group. So that's connecting folks with each other. It's helping plan events. It's working on resources that they can more easily take back to their day-to-day work and reference and leverage to take the ideas that we generate collectively as members to then bring back to their jobs and apply at their workplaces.
Yeah. That's all such interesting, good stuff to do, which actually kind of leads to the next question, because that stuff that you're doing
was something that you would have wanted, I guess, when you were in the workforce? Like, what did you do before you joined the group?
So my background is actually as a technical writer is the foundation of my career, which I'm always grateful for because, especially because the beginning of my technical writing career was, as I said, embedded with a support team. So from day one, working with software companies mostly is my experience. I kind of was a bridge between what the product was intending to do, how it was meant to function, documentation, but fully being connected with that customer experience, that support experience, and how customers are really experiencing the product, and creating, documentation or knowledge-based articles for customers. And then that sort of segued into my focus on knowledge management, which of course, Knowledge Centered Service, KCS, is an initiative managed by the Consortium for Service Innovation. It's the one that we are most known for. And that's how I came to know the consortium.
What made you decide to kind of join them? Was like, what was it? I mean, you were part of that consortium before you joined them, but what was the key thing or the key reason that you wanted to kind of be a part of it, kind of on a full-time basis?
Yeah, great question. So really it came down to the fact that through a few jobs that I got to participate as a member, because I worked for member companies, my favorite part of my job was always interacting with folks in the consortium. It really is kind of a special place where folks come together. Our mission at the consortium is to create space to think and time to explore. And it's kind of an opportunity to step a little bit outside of your day-to-day and work with peers across industries, across companies who are focused on similar problems as you, who are experiencing similar challenges as you, and think about how we can work together with what we already know to tackle those problems, and also intentionally try and think of new things we haven't thought about before. And I kind of love the endless potential of that experience.
Yeah, that's just that. To me, that would be like one of the greatest kind of jobs, to kind of help and do that stuff and help people. I love it.
Yeah.
And just from looking at the website for the consortium, they have some really interesting initiatives. And I want to talk about KCS a little more, but there were two other ones they mentioned that maybe we'll talk about first, or you can tell me more about. One is the intelligent swarming, and the other one is the predictive customer engagement. Those sound really, really interesting.
Yes, I can talk a bit more about those. So intelligent swarming, again, is focused on the support organization and trying to really reconsider the best way to handle the work or the customer inquiries that come through into a support team. So your common traditional support team is often organized around tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Your tier 1 folks handle the most simple or common problems, password resets, for example, before password resets became automatic, account changes, things like that. And then tier 2 and tier 3 generally respectively increase in complexity. So that's traditionally how it goes. And cases would often come in first to tier 1. And if it wasn't able to be solved by tier 1 folks, they would escalate it up. And intelligent swarming is an attempt to sort of revisit that model and actually do away with tiers entirely and do two things quite differently. One is try to get the case or the work directly to the right person right away, so that you're eliminating the need for handoffs at all, because you have the person who's best equipped to handle that particular case or customer inquiry right away. So there's matching people and work is kind of one of the ways that we talk about it.
Yeah.
And then the other way is that if the customer support agent who does first receive that case is unable to solve it on their own, instead of passing off that case to someone else, usually a higher tier, they actually engage in real-time collaboration with their peers to find out the answer. And so they're still the one responding to the customer. And that helps both the customer get an answer much quicker, because the customer themselves are not sort of being handed off to someone else, And it helps the agent themselves learn how to address a case that they didn't know before because they're getting the information from their peers. And so then the next time that agent receives a similar inquiry, they're able to handle it themselves right away.
Do you have a lot of, I guess, members is what the companies that would be that are with kind of with, do you have a lot who are doing that successfully, or do you find that that's kind of an approach that everybody's trying to learn, but they're still trying to figure out how to do it the best way?
We do have some member companies that are doing it successfully, and I can send you some links for the show notes to some resources we have where we have some recorded web sessions where members have talked about their experience. So if folks want to hear directly from the folks who are doing it, we can make that happen. And there's a lot of still work to be done, work to figure it out. What I've just talked about requires a lot of people, process, and technology working in harmony. And it's one of those things that is continually evolving as well. So we have members that are working together to sort of help each other figure out how to optimize how they're doing it.
Thank you to the sponsor of the Content Matters podcast. Ingenix is a leading provider of agile content management solutions. You can use Ingenix CMS to manage and deliver modern websites, customer support portals, knowledge bases, and more. Ingenix software enables content reuse, true mobile and multi-channel content delivery, and insightful content discovery. To learn more about how Ingenix can support your content experiences, visit ingenix.com.
It's great to hear that there are companies that are really doing more than just talking about giving a better kind of customer support experience, but they're actually going through the steps and trying to figure it out and making those changes. So yeah, it'll be great to put those in the show notes. That'd be great.
Yeah. And one of the biggest CRM companies out there recently actually acquired a product, and they're working towards productizing this intelligent swarming concept. So it's definitely gaining traction. And from the consortium perspective, our perspective is that the more folks that try these things and report back and collaborate on how to improve, the better. So most of our methodologies are available for public use under the Creative Commons. So the more we hear about, the more of the market, taking this approach, the better.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So then the predictive customer engagement, what's that one all about?
Predictive customer engagement is really thinking towards the ideal scenario, which is that the best support experience is no support experience at all. Ideally, you're proactively addressing customer needs before they have an exception, is one way that we talk about a support request, is a customer's experiencing an exception to what they're trying to do. So first of all, the idea of predictive customer engagement does rely on the fact that first and foremost, you've sort of figured out how to tackle and handle customer issues. You don't start with predictive customer engagement, right? You make sure that you're doing the basics well, that you have the infrastructure and the operation to address customer issues as they have them reactively, which is, traditionally how support interactions work.
Yeah.
But ideally, over time, the data and insight you're getting from those customer interactions, you're learning about how customers encounter problems, when, where, how, all the context around it, and you put mechanisms in place to address those issues before they even encounter them, or you address them so quickly that there's no extra effort done on the customer part. A story that we love to tell among the consortium, and apologies to the member that I know brought this up at a meeting. I don't remember who it is right now, but the story that we like to tell is that someone was watching a movie on Amazon Prime, and something happened with the streaming or the connection where they had paid to rent the movie and something interrupted that movie, and it either started over or something disrupted the customer experience watching that movie. And before the customer even had a chance to reach out to Amazon, they received a communication from Amazon that said, "We noticed you had a disruption in your movie watching experience. Here's the refund for your rental fee. And, here's where you can go continue watching your movie." So that's a great example of just proactively addressing a customer need where they don't even have to go and reach out or spend any extra effort when that exception does occur.
I can think of a few examples where that's happened to me, not with Amazon, but with, like, say, Disney, where that would have been nice to have gotten that kind of experience when it happened. So that's great.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea. The best support success is the one that never happened. So that's pretty cool way to think about that.
Yeah, certainly not possible all the time, but something to be thinking ahead for, right? How and when can you start to incorporate that type of experience?
Yeah, definitely. And then I think you also said something where people need to find answers where they encounter the exception, which I think is another interesting thing to think about, because we don't tend to see our support services work like that, right? Not, at least not today, not for most companies.
Yeah, it's not, I would say it's not quite ubiquitous yet, but it does go back to something I mentioned at the beginning, where support and product experiences are becoming more and more integrated, more and more intertwined. From the technical writing, my background there, one of the sort of first common examples of this is what we would call in-product help. So originally your help, your documentation resources, of course, if we go way back, was a printed manual that you got in the box, right? That you'd have to go look up. Yeah. And then things went digital. So you at least could find the online documentation, user manual, troubleshooting guide, whatever it might be, but it required leaving the product to go find that resource. And then what's been around for a couple decades already now is the idea of in-product help, that you don't have to actually leave the product to find the help resources. It's at least another tab within the product or one click away from within the product. You're not having to go seek it out on your own. And then if you think forward even more, how can you more fully integrate whatever that help or support resource is right where the customer is, whether they're within the product or however they're engaging with your product or service or brand, the help, so to speak, is already where they already are.
Yeah, that would definitely be a really nice thing. And I don't have a problem with the in application help, but I find sometimes it's not easy to navigate it. So it's nice to know that we're thinking of ways to make that even better than it is today.
Exactly. So instead of just linking to an article where they still have to read through the article to find the information that's relevant to them, imagine more personalized, customized answers or guidance that's delivered, just the snippet that they need right where they are. It's all about reducing customer effort in a way.
Yeah. You mentioned there, like, the idea of getting the knowledge to the brand overall, not just necessarily in the application or with the application or products, but and I think I'm going to take that as you saying, like, maybe having a knowledge base on the website or in the public domain somewhere where people who aren't your customers can learn more about your product before they make the final decision to buy. But there seems to be a lot of concern by a lot of companies out there that putting the knowledge base out in the public domain is giving away, trade secrets. Like, what's your kind of take on the walled garden approach versus the open knowledge base?
Sure. So in general, I think that stance, the sort of hesitancy to make information public because your competitors might see it, I think that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's too harsh of an assessment, but I just don't think it's true. First of all, if you have a competitor who really wants to know how your product works for good or for bad, they can find out.
Yeah.
A knowledge base that's hidden behind a login is not going to stop someone from either buying your product and becoming a customer or asking a friend who is a customer to send them the information, right? Of course, it's not truly hidden anyway. And all you're doing is putting up barriers for your current customers and, like you said, for your prospects potentially to get a sense of what you have available that would be helpful to them. Yeah,
no, I think, it's definitely not going to keep people from finding out about how your product works or anything like that. So yeah, that's definitely a really good point. Yeah.
Now, one thing to add there is that the fact that you shouldn't waste your time trying to hide information from the public. Doesn't mean that there aren't advantages for creating what we would call a personalized experience that is dependent on a login. So you can certainly enhance personalization and relevance by making a logged in experience available. It just shouldn't be something that is a requirement to engage with your content at all.
Yeah, no, perfectly agree with that. Is that kind of part of what the KCS, the knowledge centered service aspect of the consortium? Is that kind of what some of the stuff you address with that?
Yeah, it certainly can be. So with KCS, the goal is to capture all of your customer questions that traditionally happen in a one-to-one conversation, right? A customer contacting support and a support agent giving that customer a response. KCS operationalizes a way to instantly leverage that one-to-one experience and publish it out to your customer facing knowledge base for self-service, because the idea is if one customer is encountering that question, chances are very high that at least one, if not many others, will as well. So how can we efficiently share that answer to the masses? And then there are recommendations within the methodology about how to capture that knowledge in a structured way to make it even easier for a similar customer with a similar experience to find that content that's relevant to them.
I think I was on LinkedIn the other day, and Christina Halverson was talking about how important content strategy is now, and how people are finally recognizing that that's what drives customer experience, is doing a really good content strategy. And this kind of makes me think of that and plays into that when you talk about it like that.
Absolutely. There's a lot of overlap in the concepts. I love following Christine Halverson and Brain Traffic. They do some great stuff.
I know. Yeah. So when it comes to creating success content, one of the things I think you've said is that it needs to be a wider endeavor than just creating content for your customers, that you want to create content or offer knowledge that helps non-customers as well. Why do you think that's so important?
Well, I think it really does two things. One, if you take that stance of wanting your content to be valuable beyond just the individual interactions with your product, you're actually creating content that's more valuable for your customers. Because if you think about how your customers might be using your product, let's say it's a screenshot tool, they're not just using your tool to take screenshots. They're using your tool to take screenshots as part of their day-to-day work that includes communication, whether that's internal or external. So TechSmith is a company that makes a product called Snagit. I'm not affiliated with them at all, but I've been a longtime user of their products. Yeah, and a longtime user of their products and a fan of what I would say is their content strategy, because they really look at the wider scope of what a customer is trying to do and help customers use their product in the context of their job, not just in the context of how to use this tool. So a lot of the recommendations that they provide in their content and training, you actually could mix and match with any screenshot tool. It's great guidance. So you're helping your current customers achieve their ultimate goals, which goes beyond your specific product or service, like I said, and potentially you're creating content that's useful for non-customers. Maybe they're using one of your competitors' tools right now, or maybe they don't even know yet which tool they want to buy. But if they're finding your content as useful, that's a great way to funnel customers or prospects, so to speak, towards becoming a customer.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. It's definitely important to not just think of customers. It's important to help your customers, but it's also important to kind of encourage and help people that aren't customers, because maybe someday they'll become one, or they'll know someone who want to become one. So, yep. Cool.
Exactly.
All right. Something else that I think you had said is that we needed to reframe how we generate content in the organization. So what do you think's not working, and how do we need to evolve?
So, in terms of reframing how content is generated in an organization, this is really taking the knowledge management perspective that content creation, generation, or capture, however you want to call it, is not just the responsibility of writers. I'm using air quotes if you can't see, right? Writers, content designers are hugely important, and they should be, have important roles in every organization. However, any employee who is engaging with your product in any way, with a customer in any way, with a prospect in any way, the information that they're exchanging, that is valuable knowledge. And the more you can enable everyone who's involved, and this actually includes your customers as well. Communities is a way that we've seen this happen often. It's a more tangible example of how customers create content in communities or forums, but also the example I already gave of if your customer is writing in with a question or an inquiry or some sort of confusion about your product, that is content that can be leveraged and repurposed, whether that goes back to product feedback for product improvement or being used to create customer-facing public resources. So the idea is really thinking about how knowledge is constantly being exchanged and generated with any new sort of interaction in your organization, and how are you enabling all of that knowledge to become what we call content. And non-traditional content creators should be as much a part of that as anyone.
Which explains why a content strategy is so critically important.
Absolutely.
And how it encompasses all the information and across the company and not just from one or two individual departments.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I was curious, you received a LavaCon award at the LavaCon award at LavaCon this year, but it was for something you and your team did last year. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was for my previous role at a company that actually is a consortium member, but at the time my role at the company was customer success enablement, but I worked with the support team, helping the customer support team have the resources they needed to support our customers. And we did a version of KCS. I worked with the team to implement a tool, but of course, it was more about process and team collaboration to enable the support team to real-time capture knowledge that was happening in individual support interactions and create resources for the support team to use. The nature of that product was kind of high complex, and there were a lot of resources and troubleshooting that the support team had to do behind the scenes to help our products. So not everything could become self-service, but we had a few support agents that had been on the team for 5, 8, 10 years, which actually is kind of unheard of a little bit in support. It wasn't common. It was a wonderful asset to the company, but they had a lot of information in their heads. And we were trying to onboard a whole new group of support folks. And so what we did is we enabled the longtime support folks to capture that knowledge real time and basically created the training manual, so to speak, to onboard these new agents. And it just became a part of the support process that if any support agent had a question about how to resolve a customer issue, the expectation was that they would search our internal knowledge base first. And if the answer wasn't there, they would collaborate with the team. We used Slack at that organization. And as soon as they got the answer, they were responsible for adding that information to the internal knowledge base. So it was helping our support agents become content creators for themselves.
I think that's great. It's really nice to see an example of how all of that works in the real world. So, and it's really good to get that knowledge out of someone's head and get it in a place where everyone else has access to it. Perfect.
Exactly.
Okay. If there was one thing that you would want people to kind of understand or take the time to learn about the work that you're doing right now, what would you tell them to do?
Oh, good question. I have to pick one thing.
It's a trick question.
Well, so I will answer this from more of my personal professional perspective rather than my specific role. I'll say I'll answer it that way first, which is that personally, I'm just always I'm seeking to find inspiration and examples that are completely outside of where we're used to looking. So if you want to improve how you're doing things, it's important to go beyond just looking at the market leader in your category. Look at a completely different industry, especially when it comes to consumer expectations and consumer interactions. What are the brand new companies and markets that are coming up and getting popular that potentially didn't even exist 5-10 years ago? And how can you look to them for inspiration to improve your customer experience?
That is great advice, definitely. There's so much to kind of learn from the work that you're doing and the stuff that you've done already. It's really been great to talk to you.
This has been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah. So how does someone get involved in the consortium, whether it be on a company level or just as an individual? Can you do it as an individual as well?
Right now, you cannot. You can just join as a company. Because we are not for profit and the way we are organized, our member companies are actually technically co-owners of the methodology that we create. Okay. So that does need to be tied to companies at this time. Now, as I said, we do make a lot of our methodology and our resources available to the public under Creative Commons license. So there's of course, there's tons that happens behind the scenes that is available just to members. But as we're innovating new ideas behind the scenes in members only interactions, we're constantly looking to figure out what we can sort of formalize and publish and make available publicly. So anyone can pop onto our website, serviceinnovation.org, and it'll be pretty clear what's for members only. And then there's links right there directly to all of the methodology that we make available publicly.
Sounds good. I'll make sure to put those links in the show notes for people to get access to as well. So that's great.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great one.